Let's talk gear. What did I really use in Iceland, and what was just dead weight in my bag? So those of you who've been following along closely know that I have been in Iceland for the past 2 weeks with McKay Photography Academy. I know Iceland is on many people's bucket list. If it's not, I seriously think you should put it there. For anybody who likes to take any type of landscape pictures, it's an amazing place. I'll run a slideshow of some of my favorite pictures that I've processed so far at the end of this video. But let's get right into talking about the gear I brought. I did this, it was a little bit of a scatterbrained video right before I left because during the video, it was a live broadcast, I was communicating with Elton, trying to get me a Sony A7R Mark II before I left for Iceland on the day I was leaving for Iceland. So let's take a moment, take a deep breath, take a look at what I brought with me and what actually got used and what I have to say about it. Now, if you've been watching my vlogs, you've seen some of this already, so I'm going to be fairly quick. If you haven't watched my vlogs, take some time to do so. Vlogs 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are all solid. 1 is a little boring, but has a good amount of information about the Sony A7R Mark II. I'll try not to repeat too much of that in this video, but all of them I think are worth watching, so go take a moment, watch them, give them a thumbs up, share them out with friends and family who are thinking about Iceland. And the McKay folks are pre-planning a 2017 July trip to Iceland. I'll be sharing more information about that soon, so stay tuned. So the first thing that I want to say I brought with me is the LG G4 along with the Lav Smart Mic, Rode Smart Lav Mic. Comes in this little package. It is just a little lav mic that has a 3.5mm jack at the end, and it's not a normal one. It is that 3-ring jack which allows your smartphones to pick that up as a mic signal. You can't just plug a normal mic into here because the phone just thinks it's headphones. You got to have that 3rd ring on. I can't pull it out because I'm using it right now. I was about to, on the jack for it to actually work. I'm recording audio on this right now instead of the Zoom XLR mics. It's just so easy to work with. When I'm done, I have a file, I throw it in Dropbox, it's there on my computer a moment later, and it's ready to sync up. I recorded a lot of the vlogs with the LG G4, both front-facing and back-facing camera. Really happy with the quality. I mentioned in yesterday's vlog, sometimes the stabilization was a little overzealous, a little bit jelly. Sometimes I would have to be careful about which direction I was facing to make sure exposure was good on me. In bright conditions, I could be really underexposed with the background as bright or vice versa. But in general, this let me create the content quickly without too much worry, and that is appreciated, and that's what's important. So I'd say this is probably what I use the most. I also took a lot of pictures with this and just really enjoyed them. I've been working with the manual camera in here. I have had it on JPEG and DNG. I'm pretty sure I'm going to turn the DNG off. I know the big deal about this phone, and one of the reasons I was excited is it shoots RAW. I don't really care. The JPEGs are great. There haven't been any shots out of here that I felt like I really wanted to edit and pull more information out. And truthfully, the RAWs, they don't have that much more information in them. Highlights still are blown because you're working with a very small and somewhat limited sensor in here compared to a DSLR. But overall, just really happy with just the ease of which to record and shoot with that phone. Now, the Sony. This is the Sony A7R Mark II, and I shared some early thoughts with you all like 2 days after I landed in Iceland, after I'd used it a little bit. My #1 complaint, and this wasn't surprising to me, but it was somewhat surprising how bad it was, is battery life. Now, lots of you wrote in with different tips. Some of those I implemented. A combination of implementing some of those tips plus myself being trained a little bit better in how to use this because I'm used to just leaving my DSLR on all the time. I typically shoot with DSLRs, Canon 5D Mark III. On this trip, I also brought along the 5DSR. I just leave them on all the time. They go to sleep. They don't use any battery worth mentioning, and that's great. Not so much when you leave this guy on, especially if it's around your neck or if it's on a rabbit strap slung around your side. The little EVF keeps triggering, the little sensor keeps triggering the EVF, and so it stays on. And if it's on, one of these screens is on. And if one of these screens is on, it is sucking power. So I learned to turn it off more often. And in that first day, I was getting a couple of hours, draining the battery like 75%, a couple hours of walking around, shooting photos, some video. Since then, I could go almost half a day before I'd even have to start worrying about the battery. And again, having one of those little RAV Power USB bits that allows you to charge it while on the go, I'm pulling this out of the bag of stuff, has just been fantastic. So it really, I'm shooting a wedding with it this weekend, or it's going to be one of the cameras I'm shooting a wedding with. So I'll be really interested to see in that kind of situation differences from wandering around landscape. But having one of these to charge it while you're walking around, or while you're eating lunch, or while you're back on the bus or in the car worked really nicely. Articulating screen. It's got to be. So the downside is that battery life. There are some other downsides. My full review will be out sometime next week after I shoot this wedding. I want to be able to talk about this camera from the standpoint of I've shot 2 weeks of landscapes. Now I've shot a serious wedding. Not just kind of pretend to review this camera, but really use it and then share with you my thoughts. And these articulating screens are just fantastic. And that was just reinforced to me after watching so many of the participants on this trip, many of them with 5D Mark IIIs or 60s or Nikon D7100s, and craning their necks to get any shot that wasn't at eye level, because it's just, and this articulating screen is just so nice. It's so nice on a tripod. It's so nice when you're holding it and you can turn sideways and shoot at the hip. Really, really like that. One of the other common comments I've seen people say is that they really don't like the form factor and the way it feels in the hand when you have bigger, heavier lenses on it. Well, I shot with this and the Metabones adapter quite a bit, and the 7200, and it feels great. I have no issues, and I'm pretty sensitive about that. Well, it seems to be caught on one of the pieces of the bag. So this is the F28 Is Lens. This is a big, heavy lens, and when you put it on there, they work well together, but we'll come back to that in a second. Right now I have the little 28mm prime on here. A fantastic walk around lens. It's affordable. F2, nice. I found the quality to be excellent. And remember, it's stabilized because this camera has in-body image stabilization. Fantastic. I can shoot handheld waterfall pictures and get that blurry water. Those of you who've been watching everything I said know I'm starting to repeat myself, but just really nice. So overall, really happy with this camera. I'll come back and touch on some downsides in my full review, but that worked well. The quality is great, and the ability to shoot in 4K, punch in whenever I need to, was really appreciated. The lens that I use the most via the Metabones adapter, and I'll talk more about this in a second, is the Canon 24-70. This was one of the questions I got when I asked you all to ask me some questions about the trip, the gear, and folks asked if you were only limited to one lens and one camera, what would it be? And without a doubt, it would be the Sony with a 24-70. Now, I happen to have the Canon, so I picked up the Metabones. But if I didn't have Canon glass already, I'd pick up the f4 version, because very rarely did I shoot wider than f4 aperture. This landscape, I wasn't shooting often in low light where I didn't want a slower shutter speed for waterfalls or something, some kind of motion like that. So it didn't really matter, but this is what I had, and this focal range for me was perfect. I did take along with me a 16-35, and I really didn't use it very often. 24mm, in my opinion, is quite wide on a full frame, and the times I went wider just felt messy, or it made everything seem small. And here we are with these massive glaciers, sometimes these massive mountains, and I wanted them to look big and be in your face. And when you zoom out the 16, everything just shrinks and spreads out. I'm falling apart. So it's a lovely lens, 16-35, but I just did not find that I like that look very often. So 24-70, hands down, worked well for me. The next most used lens was the 70-200, again, because you can really kind of compress and pull everything in. You can shoot the icebergs, you can shoot the glacier in the background and the mountain, and have them all close together to really get a sense of this massive landscape and all of these pieces that made up the landscape. And then the 16-35 I have to go through my metadata and look exactly number of lenses, but you know, I threw this on anytime we were going out for an evening walk or I wanted to travel a little bit lighter. This was just really, really nice. So, Sony, Canon lenses. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put some stuff down here so it's out of the way as I get more things out. This is a Metabones adapter. They're not cheap. What's $5.99? Maybe $4.99. I'll have to look that up. No glass here. I had people ask about loss of optical quality. No issues there. But there, you know, the big question when the Sony A7R Mark II came out, a lot of early reviewers who had their hands on early copies said autofocus is as good as a Canon lens on a Canon DSLR. I found that to be true 95% of the time. However, when you get close to the minimum focus distance seems to be a little bit different when you're using the adapter versus just straight on the camera. I think that makes sense. You're changing some aspects of that distance and focal plane there. I saw some serious hunting. I also saw some serious hunting out at the far end of some telephotos. Sometimes out at the end of the 70-200, if it didn't feel like there was good contrast for it to grab onto, it would hunt a good bit. But otherwise, I shot with those Canon lenses I just mentioned, a Tamron 150-600, the tilt shift lens was manual. There was at least, the Canon 70-300L, and autofocus worked well with all of those most of the time. Sometimes in low light and sometimes at that minimum focus or out at the far end of the telephoto. Switching to manual focus in the Sony, I had it set so it automatically throws up the focus peaking, and you just crank that focus ring and you can watch that focus peaking move through your frame. Made it really easy to do manual focus. So both for video and just for still photos at times, again for landscape, that worked really well and I had no issues. Elton, who I mentioned was so nice as in to secure me a A7R Mark II, also had one for himself. He has a cheaper adapter. He had Velux, I believe it was called, just $99. Build quality was clearly not the same. You did not have this chrome alloy material in the back. It was this kind of all black field aluminum material. Definitely felt a little cheaper in the hand. And it did not seem to sit quite as snugly against his Sony as the Metabones did. And with some lenses, it seemed to suffer a little bit less focus. It just, some. But other lenses, it seemed just fine. We threw it on both of them, tested it back and forth. And for $99, if you've just got a couple Canon lenses, I would try that before spending big bucks on the Metabones, especially if you're doing video and you just want to throw a lens on and you don't want to use autofocus at all. Otherwise, it seems excellent. I also have an adapter in right now from Comlight that I will be sharing a complete review of soon. So stay tuned for that. More to say about that. The Canon 5D SR, I said this to somebody on the trip. This felt like the old friend that you kind of ignore when the new really cool guy comes along. This is a great camera, but for landscapes without the articulating screen, it's just kind of frustrating when you look over in your bag and there is this camera that is more perfect for shooting landscapes than this, not to mention the dynamic range differences. We'll be talking more about that in a minute. So, I honestly did not shoot with a Canon 5D SR much. 1 or 2 days, I shot some shots. I took some photos. I'll be sharing those with you soon, and I'll be doing a more scientific side-by-side tests of these two soon. But really, this is a very niche camera. This, I think, works for very few people these days. That doesn't make it bad. It just means that there's a small market for that. Whereas the Sony A7R Mark II, which is cheaper, I think satisfies a much bigger range for folks. The circular polarizer was on the end of that. I used that some on this trip as well. And I had a spare Sony battery. The A7R Mark II comes with 2 batteries. So let's set those things aside. Let's bring up my monopod / selfie stick that I threw a MePhoto tripod head on the end of. I use this just a little bit to get kind of longer shots wider selfie shots to give a little bit more story of where I was and what I was doing. But that was really just one day in the Zodiac out among the icebergs. Otherwise, I didn't use it very much, but I think I should some more. Black rabbit strap, very nice, very easy to carry the bag or the camera around with. I use that fairly frequently. This was back up here. This was the XLR mics that can be plugged into the Zoom. Never used them, never took them out of the bag because the thing I'm wearing right now did the job for me and didn't need those. Pixel Rocket with SD cards. You know what? I shot completely on the 128 gigabyte card for the Sony. It did fill up right at the very end, but I took the video files off, backed those up, and then removed them, and then just kept shooting with it because I only really had one more day. 82 millimeter polarizer filter, used some, not a ton. And here is the 16 millimeter fisheye from Sony. This attaches to the end of the 28 millimeter f2 lens, like an add-on. Now, typically add-on lenses aren't very good quality. I found this quality to be excellent, really good. But, you know, as I was saying a few moments ago, this view doesn't work for me very much. If you're a fisheye kind of guy, you love that really wide view, then you might love this. But it's not something I'm going to be buying anytime soon. Certainly fun, certainly good quality. It's not quite a fisheye because you have all the way out to the corners. You don't have a black circle, but it certainly does start to bend or you got a lot of distortion out at the end. But I just don't like things that wide. So I forced myself to shoot with it a couple of days, and that was fun, but not so much. Let's see, a Tiffin filter that I let Corey borrow on the trip, so he was shooting video more often. I never used that. I had the Lee filter system, and I'll have a separate video coming out about these soon, including an extra video about hard versus soft gradients that will be part of that. This is a nice system. I don't think it's a must for many landscape photographers, but if you're serious and you want more control over your images and want to do less post-processing, then they work very nicely, and the quality for the most part is excellent. Some impact on quality in some cases. This is one of those little cards, the McKay Photography Academy Exposure Help Guide that they pass out at the beginning. One of the things that I think most of you think is that you need to be an expert or an intermediate level to go on these trips, and that is not true. We've got people of all abilities, and many of the people are beginners who are not comfortable in manual mode and maybe aren't even comfortable out of auto mode. But we have these sit-down sessions early on, and then throughout the course, you get all of this hands-on material. So this is all part of the Lee filter system, adapter rings, things like that. Sorry, that's loud. Okay. And then power for the laptop. I brought my 15-inch MacBook laptop. I tell you, I'd love to have a 13-inch to travel, but I can't afford to have both a 15 and a 13. European adapter plug, which remember I was asking you all, I think, yes, absolutely, you can just plug many things directly into this without the need for one of those stupid little power adapters that usually just falls out of the wall. Because MacBooks, your chargers, they can all take the different voltage from other countries. This is the little travel drive that I use. It's the Transcend 1 terabyte drive. Backed up all of my pictures to this. So my general or my workflow was, the end of the day, put the 128 gigabyte card in the little card reader that's built into the MacBook, import the pictures to the computer's hard drive while simultaneously backing them up to this. And then I would keep these two things separate. So if I left during the day, one of these would go with me or the computer would go with me. Usually this would. So, you know, there were, plus I did not remove the pictures from the cards themselves. This is a little USB 3.0 cord I used for connecting to this. It also was, it also is connected to the Canon 5D Mark III when I needed to pull images off there because I only had a CF card in there, and that worked out quite nicely. I also brought, remember, as instead of the GoPro, I brought this little stylus Olympus TG860. I used it very, very little. I thought there'd be more chances of more water to stick it in and get neat pictures, but the couple of days that we were around rivers, I would leave it in the bus and forget about it or things of that sort. So really used it very little. I'll have a full review probably coming up soon though, because it is overall very nice, and for $250, I think it's a better buy for many people than a GoPro. standard USB cord. I actually don't even know why I brought that. Never used that. This, a lot of you are interested in. A lot of people on the trip were interested in it every time I pulled it out because it's so small. This is the Petco Ultralight Tripod 2. I'll put a link down to this down below. But it can hold the Sony. That's another nice thing. I mean, yes, you put on these lenses and it starts to get heavy, as nearly as heavy as a big DSLR. It's not like, oh my gosh, it's so much lighter. But with a little bit of careful control and balance, you can get it to sit up on here. And it's just so much fun. You can actually I even shot with the 5D and the 16-35 on here some as well. Some of the quick time lapses and things like I shot. So this is just really nice. It's always in my bag. And it also even was a way to sometimes do a little bit of a longer selfie because I can hold it out like that. I think I used it like that once or twice. So this is just a really nice. I think it sells for about $18 and I can't recommend it highly enough, except if you're thinking about sticking a big DSLR on there often, know that you are limited in the way you can set it up. You know, you have to get it straight. The weight of the DSLR needs to be over the big leg because there have been times where I've set it in other ways and the weight is enough to get this to start to slide. And so it's not perfect for DSLRs, but it works well for the Sony and sometimes for the bigger DSLRs as well. Lots of lens cloths. Oh, that's a thing. 2 days in a row, this camera got wet, like scary wet. And it seems fine still. So, you know, I can't say that they do say it's weather sealed. You're now hearing from me that it got wet and it's dry. That doesn't mean that you can go out and get yours soaking wet, but it does mean that it's at least somewhat weather sealed, as they say. The Nexus 7 tablet, I talked about using that with DSLR controller connected to the 5D, and I used it once like that for the little bit of the vlog I recorded at Dedifoss. Otherwise, I didn't use it, so I shouldn't have brought it. Little waterproof case I brought for my phone, never used. This is the variable neutral density filter. Somebody else on the trip, the reason why Corey had to borrow this one is because he rented a neutral density filter. He wanted to rent a standard, a solid, a non-variable, but they only had variable. He said, aren't I going to get the X and in the sky? And they said, no, it's fine. We calibrate it. And of course, as soon as you put it on and crank it to a certain amount, you get the X. So if you got the sky in the shot and you're trying to block out light, you need a solid or you need a leaf filter system. A variable is not going to work for you. At certain strengths, you're going to get the X in the sky. This is a shower cap I borrowed from one of the rooms in case I need to throw it over my camera because I did not bring a rain sleeve. One of the days I borrowed one from one of the other participants. They had extras and I was really thankful of that, but I was going to use this in a pinch another times. Lens hoods to the 24-70. I brought an extension ring in the 40mm lens too because I said, hey, they're so small, so light, why not? There were a couple times I kind of wished that I'd gotten this out for some macro shots, but not enough to ever really get it out. And I never, ever used the 40 other than to throw on as a body cap from time to time. The 2X extender went along with me, and there were times where I used that to try to get some puffin shots. The days that we were near puffins, the weather was not very cooperative. Conditions were challenging, but Metabones adapter, 2X converter, to the 70-200, all three, that gave me 400mm of reach. I manually focused because autofocus was extremely slow. And again, manual focusing was quite easy and you can zoom in as well. And I got some shots. You'll see nothing, certainly nothing amazing, but still enough that you can clearly say, hey, that is a puffin in your picture. All of this stuff, I got some other little bits and things in the bags. We don't need to talk about those. Oh, the other big thing, the tripod. This is the Faisal tripod. I did a review of it a while ago. I love this tripod from here down. Can we still see me? There you go. I love what you can see. This head continues to give me some issues. Not only, well, I'm used to this little catch now that's up here. I talked about having this catch in the review. I was a little unhappy with that. But one thing that keeps happening is there is this tension dial right here that allows you to adjust the tension of the knob. And right now, I have this swinging freely. See how easy I can turn that knob? But the head is just jammed up. And I have pretty strong fingers, but don't have enough finger strength to fix this. I'm going to be reaching out to some folks that make high quality heads looking for an alternative head, or maybe I'll write to the Faisal guys and see if they have an alternative head, but I'm not happy with this head. The legs are freaking fantastic. I love the weight, the stability, the quick release of these. It's just such, it's like a quarter turn, not even a quarter turn, and they lock into place. Really, really love the legs. The head, not so much. So when you're looking for some other options like that. And then up in these top pockets, I just had spare batteries, card reader, money, a little flashlight I never used, and that USB host cable. So let's talk about this bag for a second. This is the Think Tank Airport Takeoff. It is a bag that is rolling or backpack. And that's good and bad. The good is you can throw it on your back when there are rough conditions. Iceland's a great example of that. There are times where you're headed across the landscape. I wanted to bring all this gear with me because I was going to record something, or I was going to play around with a couple different lenses, and it just needed to all come so I could throw it on my back. The bad is, this is a big bag, and when it's loaded, it is extremely heavy. I'm pretty tough. I've done some backpacking, 60 pounds, that was a while ago that, you know, for a week with an outward bound group, and I was fine. I mean, tired at the end of the day, but fine. I never weighed this, but with all of this gear I just pulled out of here, it's a lot. Plus the bag already probably weighs 9 or 10 pounds because it's built very beefily to have this whole rolling bit down here that's solid and the back handle and all that pulls out. It's extremely heavy to wear as a backpack when it's really loaded. And if you're buying this bag this big, you're probably going to load it up. So just be aware of that. But the other good thing I think about being able to throw it on your backpack, unlikely that you're going to be questioned about your carry-on weight. I saw them making people shove their carry-ons into those little spots. But every time I checked in with my little boarding pass, I just had this on my back. And, you know, had my face like, everything's fine. This thing on my back certainly isn't about to kill me. It weighs nothing. Don't even think about it. This isn't the heavy bag you're looking for. Those are the things I was thinking. So, you know, that's the downside. It's heavy, but you can throw it on your back when you need to, and I appreciate that. But it's also really nice because it is a nice rolling bag. The downside is there's some additional bulk here because of it being a backpack. When it's all zipped up, it sticks out a little. It doesn't sit so flat. It kind of rocks a little when it's sitting down, but otherwise it's good. The inside is nice space in here. And again, this is Think Tank. It is built just so well. There were a couple times where I was lazy about getting the straps down in here, and so I just kind of jammed the zipper around. And these are smaller zipper bits, but it just works. Again and again and again, it just works really nicely. We're headed to Greece in a couple of weeks with the McKays again. We're going to be doing some smaller regional flights on that trip. I believe I'm going to leave this bag behind and go back to my smaller, only backpack bag. And I said this in the other vlog the other day. I don't remember if I cut it out. Oh yeah, I did. I think I cut it out. Mark my words, I have a serious goal of going much lighter for that trip. I'm going to do very little testing of gear, and the Sony is mine, so I'll be bringing along, and that will save me some weight, plus a lens or two. I really don't need much for Greece. I don't expect to need a really long lens for wildlife. I don't expect to need a really wide lens now that I've decided that I really don't care for stuff wider than 24 on a full frame. I think that's it. Let's run a little slideshow of some of my favorite images, and I will be sharing some post-processing of some of these images. In fact, I've already done that with my Patreon supporters. I put up a video today just about 30 minutes long of me just walking through, picking some of the images, editing them some, showing you what I'm doing. And if you'd like to see something like that and see more of that in the future, then you should consider supporting this channel. And you can find out all that information at photorec.tv/support. As I mentioned, the McKay Group will be returning to Iceland July of 2017. Oh, I know what I do. I wanted to answer some of your questions. That's right. So if you're interested, stay tuned. I'll put a link right down below where you can sign up for their newsletter, but I believe David is collecting a special group of people to be among the first notified. And so stay tuned for that as well. Somebody asked, how much does a trip like this cost? The McKay's charge for this trip, it was about 11 days in Iceland, and that's breakfast every day. That is all in-country transportation and accommodations, $4,995. Now, I recognize that for some folks, that represents a significant expense. That is not a small amount of money to some people. They have payment plans. Go back and watch yesterday's vlog. Corey talked about this a little bit. They've got payment plans. You've got almost 2 years of ability. Set up a jar in your kitchen. Start stuffing some dollars in there. These are life-changing trips. They're amazing. So I think you should go on them. We buy all this gear, and then we wander around in our backyard, which actually can be a very nice thing to do from time to time. But it is so amazing to get out alongside master photographers, peers that are struggling along with you or have figured something out. The learning, the cross-pollination that happens on these trips, it's amazing. It really is. And you know what? Even if you don't go with the McKay's, start planning something somewhere with your camera where you really get out. But if you really want to learn, something like the McKay trip with that ratio of 4 to 5 to 1. An instructor is always within arm's reach, is great. Plus, enough of you sign up, I'll probably get to go along too. And we'll get to explore Iceland. We had 5 people on this trip that learned about McKay's through photorec.tv. That was a blast to meet you all. Everybody on this trip was so much fun. All right, so that was one question, trip budget. Another gear, I've covered that. Somebody else asked about tripods. What did all of the other people use for tripods? The MePhoto travel tripods were extremely popular. The McKay's have recommended those. Most of the people on this trip have gone on other trips with the McKay's or have gone to their class. They used to have, they still do, but not as many, have classes all over the country, day-long classes. And the MePhoto travel tripod is one of their recommendations because it's just so easy to travel with. It doesn't always get maybe as high as you'd like, but many people are willing to make that sacrifice for the fact that it can fit in a camera bag or easily in a suitcase. Nobody had any Dolica tripods, but there are some more budget-minded tripods in there among as well. I answered the question of what camera, what lens. Sony with a 24-70. Perfect. I'm happy all day long. Somebody else asked me if I thought that camper vans were a cheap way to see Iceland. I don't have any experience here, but I do know that renting a car in Iceland is extremely expensive, and gas is quite expensive as well. So I'm going to say that it's probably not a cheap way to see the country. I think you might be better off camping and using the bus system if you're really looking at trying to save, or spend and go with one of these tours because it actually works out to not be that much different. Plus you get all this other experience. I think that was all. The other big question several of you asked over the last couple of days is what were other people shooting with? And we had about 20 participants on the trip, and I counted up, asked everybody who I couldn't remember, and it was almost evenly split between crop and full frame. So we had 11 folks shooting on crop cameras, 10 folks shooting on full frame cameras, pretty heavily weighted towards the Canon 5D Mark III and Canon in general. And again, part of that is because many of these people have been on trips with the McKay's before. The McKay's used Canon 5D Mark IIIs, and oftentimes I recommend people buy the camera that their friends and family own, so it makes it easier to learn and to share. And that's, for some of these people, the McKay's are friends and family, and to have the same camera they do, or to have a camera in the same system as they do, just makes it just a little bit easier to follow along on some of the teaching. But we had folks with Nikons on here. We had a D90, a D610 Nikon, somewhere else in there, a D5300 and a D7100. We also had a Fuji. Diana shot mostly with her Fuji X100S and was quite happy with it. So a T5Is, a T4i, 60D, a couple 70Ds, and as I said, a couple 5D Mark IIIs, and then myself and Elton with our Sony A7r Mark IIs. And I think that's pretty much it. Oh yeah, SL1 was in there a little bit, and the 1DX Mark IV as well. So, a range. I want to stress again though, if you bought a camera yesterday on Costco, at Costco, or on Amazon, I hope you buy from Amazon and use my link, you can go on these trips. You do not need to be an expert. I know, this is the one thing that I would have thought too. looking at these trips and thinking and being nervous, oh, I don't know enough. Or some of you were paying attention, you saw Steve's gear, huge. You're like, what? He's got a ton. He's going to Iceland with more stuff than Toby, and Toby takes the kitchen sink. But you know what? He just happens to have that gear because he shoots with it, and he wanted to bring it all along. But that doesn't mean he's an expert. He still learned things on this trip. He's an expert in his areas of real estate photography, but he was in a whole different realm out here in the landscapes. He made some beautiful pictures. He learned a lot as well. We just all learned. It's fantastic, and I hope you will join us on a future trip. If you've got additional questions that I didn't answer in this long video thing, you leave them right down below. And if you would like to support me and this channel and the work that I do, check out photorec.tv/support. And you can follow me on Instagram as well, where I've got some of my favorite Iceland pictures. Oh, you know what? The one thing I should say that I have coming soon is a Snapseed 2.0 review and how-to. I freaking love that program. That worked so well for me for quick edits. Pictures from the Sony, wireless to my phone, edit in Snapseed. I like that better than Lightroom Mobile. It is way less buggy. It gives you more controls. Even though it doesn't work with RAW files, that's okay. I'm only really making minor edits that were RAW versus JPEG. Doesn't really matter. And then I could get them out on Instagram. So check out those pictures there and let me know if you have questions. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.